Lacrosse podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rotelli. Today on the show, we have the leader of the unanimous #1 lacrosse team in the country, @Ament. Grant, thanks for coming on the show today. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to talk to you. You guys are having a heck of a year at Penn State. In the most recent poll, you're the unanimous #1 team in the country, off to a 9-1 start this season with your only loss to Yale. How have you guys had such a great start so far this season? What's been key?
I think first off, we have some pretty talented players in our locker room, and I think that's been shown week in and week out. But also I think we have a great blend of leadership from the upperclassmen and as well as the accepting of their roles in the underclassmen and some underclassmen that have really stepped up. And it's also a team that has kind of grown up together over the past 4 years. A lot of guys in the senior class. I'm technically a redshirt junior, but guys that I played with my freshman year, we had a lot of guys that contributed from freshman year on, and then some guys that are in that class that have just started contributing this year. But we've basically been able to grow up together and kind of learn the ways of what to do and what not to do. And it's been smooth sailing thus far. But we're almost halfway through the Big Ten season, so it's the best of what we can do is yet to come. So we're excited to keep pushing and keep seeing what we can do.
Yeah, that is very exciting. You mentioned there's a lot of the same people on this year's team that have been with you for the last few years. Have the practices this season been generally the same, or are you guys doing something different at practice this year?
I would say it hasn't changed up too much. We normally take the first day or two post game and clean up, what we did wrong in that game or what we need to work on, and then we shift our focus towards our opponent, and that has seemed to work for us thus far. But I'd say our focus has changed a little bit this year and more on us and less on our opponent. Not to say we don't respect every opponent that we play, but we figure if we can do the little things very well and play our game as well as possible, everything else should take care of itself.
Yeah. Well, one thing you're doing very well this season is scoring goals. As a team, you guys are leading the nation with 17.3 goals a game. What are you doing at practice to become so great offensively?
Yeah, kind of similarly to, our team's success. Our offense has had success just because of who is out there for us. Our top 6, 4 of them are juniors or seniors, and we've played together for a while, and our chemistry is probably at an all-time high, and I still think it can get a little bit better. We've got some younger guys, specifically in that top 6, Dan Rayum and Jack Kelly, who are have really stepped up. And then in our second midline, it's actually all sophomores and freshmen, and they really just continue to gain confidence, and it's really fun to see and fun to play with to see 18 and 19-year-olds gaining confidence in front of my very own eyes every week, it seems. So, I'd say we're a confident bunch, but, our chemistry is just continuing to grow, and hopefully we can continue to push the envelope to see, how good we can really be, because I believe the best of our offense is yet to come, and we haven't played a complete game yet. So, excited to see if we can actually do that.
Yeah. Where does that confidence come from for you, and how do you help give that confidence to the younger guys who are on the team?
Yeah, so part of the thing with me is, I've learned this from other guys. When I was a sophomore, I played with Nick Aponte. He was a senior, and nothing really seemed to faze him, and I really admired that about him, and it also just gave me a lot of confidence in being able to do things on the field. So I kind of took on that role this year, just trying to be as confident as possible, but also just keeping an open line of communication with every person in the offense, giving them feedback on what I see, having them give feedback on what they see, and there's kind of a mutual respect for everybody on the field because we're all going towards a common goal. And I think that respect kind of instills confidence in one another and in each other. So it's like I said, it's seemed to work so far, but still got a lot of lacrosse supply.
Yeah, well, it's working great so far. Grant, for you personally, you lead the nation right now with 54 assists so far this season. How have you become such a great feeder?
When I was younger, I mean, my dad always told me the assist is just as good as the goal. So, I've always kind of, tried to incorporate that in my game as much as possible. But, I'm kind of benefit from the off-ball movement of the guys. One of our main sets is an invert offense, and there's just great off-ball movement up top. And a lot of people forget that, we have Canadians up there, some guys who are very good at playing off ball. We have Mac O'Keefe, probably the best stretch shooter in college lacrosse. There are some guys up there that can do very special things to create space for them off the ball. And then once they get it, they don't need a lot of room to shoot it. So, I've always taken pride in being an assist guy and kind of a quarterback type player. But a lot of my success, I would say, has come from the guys around me and them working so hard off the ball and me just being able to find them.
That's great. Well, you mentioned your dad. I want to back up a little. So I know you grew up in Pennsylvania. How'd you first get involved with lacrosse?
So my brother Brandon started playing when he was in third grade, I think. And I played soccer. My dad played soccer, so soccer was definitely my first love. And then, once my brother started playing, I actually didn't want to play baseball. I wanted to wait until I was old enough to play lacrosse. So I played soccer in the spring and in the fall. And then once I was old enough in first grade, that's when I was able to start playing myself, but was dragged along to my brother's practices, tried to participate as much as I could in those. And then my brother Blake started playing, I think, a year after Brandon. They're identical twins. So,
oh, wow.
So it was, I looked up a lot to them and kind of just tried to intermix myself with their practices and their friends playing as much as I could. So that's kind of how it started, and they kind of pushed me to be as good as I can be, and they still do today. They hold me to a very high standard. So it's awesome that we all were able to bond over the sport.
Yeah, that's very cool. So you had two brothers. Were you the youngest in the family?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of three. My brothers are 4 years older than me.
Okay, that's cool. Well, so I was reading something. Your senior year of high school, you led Haverford to a 26-0 record. And in that season, you had 37 goals and 83 assists, which is an astounding number in that league. You were also named Lacrosse Magazine's Player of the Year that year. What are some of your fondest memories from playing in high school?
There are a lot. There are definitely a lot. I mean, playing for Haverford just brought so much fun and so much joy to my life.
Who was coaching you at Haverford in those years?
So Coach Nostrand was the head coach, and then Coach Mark Patron, who now coaches at Radnor, was the offensive coordinator, and Travis Loving, who's down in Maryland coaching, was the defensive coordinator. And, those three, I would say, the greatest memory is definitely going 26-0 my senior year. That was a incredible year through and through. Sophomore year, I would say, is another great memory. We beat Malvern Prep in the Interac Invitational Championship. And they were a rival of ours. But yeah, I mean, playing under Coach Nostrand, Coach Patron, and Coach Loving, I would say definitely probably the thing I benefited from most is, and it's definitely one of my best memories, just because they really prepared me for the next level. They prepared all of us for the next level. I mean, on that team specifically, there are a lot of guys that are having success in college strictly because of how they pushed us and how they taught us to play the game that I don't think you get in a lot of high schools. So I would say playing for them and learning as much as I could while I was there for 4 years is definitely the biggest memory of mine, without a doubt.
That's great. Well, Grant, take us through your recruiting process. What was that like, and how did you end up at Penn State?
Yeah, so ninth grade. I was probably 5'3", a buck 35. It wasn't very big. I didn't make the varsity team. Kind of swung back and forth for a few games. I was a little taken back because I went to Haverford for lacrosse and it wasn't working out, but kept pushing. And then in that summer, getting a few looks from mainly Maryland and here. So both my parents are alumni at Penn State, and my two brothers were actually on the club team here while I was going through the recruiting process. And I'd gotten letters from a few other schools and contacted from a few coaches, but it kind of came down to, I took a visit here and talked with Coach Brownie, and the way that he goes about his day is just about as good as any man can go about his day. He's a very family man first, but also just he holds you to an incredibly high standard to push you to be as good as you can be, which lined up pretty well with my high school coaches and kind of how I was raised as well. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me once he laid an offer out on the table, and being able to be here. I was actually in school with my brothers for 1 year, which was really cool and obviously good for my family to be able to have all three boys in one place. And it was. I haven't really looked back since. It's been one of the best decisions I could have made. Just thankful that Coach gave me the opportunity, and still trying to make the most of it through my 4 years here.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job. How old were you when you committed to Penn State? Because that was before they changed the recruiting timeline.
Yeah, it was just before I started my 10th grade year.
Okay.
So I went to recruiting things and played summer ball. So I think I went to Nike Blue Chip, and played summer ball for the Dukes and Mesa Fresh. So definitely had a lot of exposure and played in front of Coach a few times, which was good.
Yeah, you talk about Coach Brownie and how he goes about his day. I'd love to hear more about that. What's it like playing for him, and specifically, what has he taught you?
Yeah, I would say one word to describe him is accountable, and then another would be hardworking. He knows kind of how far he can push guys. He holds me to a very high standard, and I appreciate that. Not necessarily always in the moment, but I know he's looking because he feels that he can get a little bit more out of certain guys, and he holds the whole team to that standard, no matter if we just beat the number one team in the country or if we just lost to the worst team in the country. It's just a very consistent mindset that he has from the fall all the way through to the spring. And then also he works tirelessly, with watching film, working with drills with us, just interacting with us, all in. Obviously, we want to be the best on Saturday or Sunday whenever we're playing. But he works more so that way we're better teammates and better people once we leave this place. That's his ultimate goal, which obviously, my parents loved hearing that going through the recruiting process. And I think any family would love hearing that. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely a huge role model for all of us, and what he does. And, I'm very lucky to be able to play under him. Now that I'm coming back, I get to play for him for 5 years, which is really cool.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned coming back from injury. You missed the entire 2018 season with a preseason foot injury. Take us through your recovery and what you did to come back better than ever this year.
Yeah, so I got injured, I think it was 3 or 4 days before the home opener. Got surgery the day before the home opener. The original anticipation was that I was going to be back mid-season. It was the same injury that Rob Pennell had when he was in Cornell, that foot injury, and it was just a slow recovery, and it didn't go as expediently as I wanted it to. So had to sit out the whole year, but it did give me good perspective and kind of made me more hungry than ever to get back and be in the lineup and go through the practices and all those things that I missed. Yeah, it was a very tough experience at the time, but it definitely grew an appreciation for the grind and practice and conditioning and in the weight room, and then also obviously for playing in games that sometimes people take for granted, and I took for granted at times. And you never know when one wrong step you could be out for the season. So kind of try to continue to keep that mindset through this season.
Yeah, that's great. What is your typical off-season training like? What are you doing to become faster and a better lacrosse player on the field?
Yeah, we have phenomenal strength and conditioning coach here, Coach Matt Dorn. He's incredibly hardworking coach that just wants the best for every player, wants to make them as good as they can be physically on game day. So, strength and conditioning, there's a lot of things that go into it. Your typical regimen, lifting Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, conditioning probably 3 days a week, and, trying to push as much as we can. But also kind of taper back at times. This fall we kind of went in it with the understanding that you don't need to be in the best shape possible in September, but you need to be in the best shape possible in January through May. Because sometimes you get guys that die out towards the end of the year just because they're physically tired, and that just happens just because you put so much wear and tear on the body through the 12 months of a year. And so we've definitely been smart about when to push and when to build up, so that way we could hit the ground running, which I think we did pretty successfully in the preseason this year. Playing Army and Lafayette, I think we were as in good a shape as we could be with a lot of things we still could work on. So I wouldn't say it's too much of a different regimen than any other team, but I'd say that where we separated ourselves this year was just how we went about things and going at it more as in a scientific way rather than just work as hard as you can all the time type of way.
Yeah, that's smart. Do you think that the team has, suffered from burnout in past years?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I was a freshman and sophomore. I think the younger guys have a little bit of an easier time, but just because if you're playing as a freshman or a sophomore, I mean, you're just happy to be a part of it. But it's a long season. We still have 6 weeks left until Memorial Day weekend, and that's a lot.
Right.
As we're already 10 games into the season, so it's you got to be smart about it. And I think some teams really do a good job in peaking in May, and that's kind of what our hope is physically, so that way we can have no excuses at the end of the day.
Yeah. Grant, you're 5'9", right? 165. So you're not the biggest guy on the field. How have you been able to have so much success? What separates you when you're out there?
Yeah, first, that's one of the beauties of lacrosse. You know, you don't need to be the biggest, you don't need to be the strongest. But if you can play to your strengths, I think it takes advantage. You know, I tend to use my quickness, and being able to beat defenders with speed. And recently, I've been able to kind of use my strength because I've taken the weight room a little bit seriously and a little bit more seriously, and seen some numbers increase and gotten a lot stronger. So I'm able to play a little bit more physically than I was in my younger years. But separating in any way that you can. Vision is definitely a big one. Always having your head up when you're dodging, either for the slide or for the shot. And then another thing that I've stressed since I was younger is just being able to play with both hands. I think that's dying off in a lot of ways in lacrosse. You see a lot of box players and a lot of one-handed lacrosse players, and that's if you can go both hands, I think it opens up a lot of doors for you on the field, and it also makes it a lot harder for teams to scout you and cover you.
Yeah. So if you're talking to a younger player and you're telling him you need to work on both hands, what are you specifically telling them to do?
So first is getting on the wall. You got to get on the wall. So at Haverford, every morning, an hour before school, the 9th and 10th graders would hit the wall, and the 11th and 12th graders got to shoot. So that we did that an hour before school in the fall every day.
Wow.
So you got to make sure you're getting on the wall, but first you got to make sure your form is correct. The mirror drill's the classic. Putting the sock in your stick and just making sure that your lefty and righty form are identical that's the first step. And then once you can work and continue to improve, you can move on to shooting and on the run stuff. But it's incredibly important to pick it up when you're younger, because it's pretty hard when you're older. Once your skills are already pretty much close to getting it to its peak. It's harder to get that offhand working if you've just been using your dominant hand majority of the time.
So I don't think everybody would know the mirror drill, actually. So tell us exactly how that one works.
Yeah, so you basically put a sock, you make a ball out of a sock, so that way you aren't breaking the mirror, but you just stand in front of a mirror, whether it's in your bathroom or wherever, and so you throw with your strong hands, figuring out its form. Then you switch over to your weak hand just so you can figure out the tendencies that you have with your strong hand so it looks identical once you get to your weak hand. That's something that I did when I was younger. Once I got it, then tried to use my left hand as much as possible. Playing with it in practice a little bit extra, or if say you're playing a team that's not that you're running up the score on, and play just with your left hand and try to get better with that, or going to camps and playing some days just with your left hand or just with your right hand, whatever it may be. Just being able to challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone. I think that's the hardest thing, is just understanding that it is a process and you're probably going to make mistakes, but if you continue to push, it opens up a lot of doors for you.
Oh, that's great. I love that. So, when you were growing up, were you a big fan of the game, watching a lot of college and pro lacrosse? And if so, who were the guys that you were watching specifically, and how would you try to learn from them while you were watching games?
Yeah, so I would, every Saturday there was always that game on ESPNU, and if I saw a cool play, I would pause it, go out and try it in my front yard. And then
That's so funny. I did the same exact thing, but when I was doing it, it was VHS, so it was a little different.
yeah, I was able to. The DVR definitely helped me in that case. But all of the greats that I watched, and Mikey Pals, Rob Pennell's, Mark Millen's, Paul Rabel's, Kyle Harrison's, all of the greats of college and professional lacrosse were always on TV. I also did watch a lot of YouTube videos on just highlights of those guys and just the way that they moved and the way that they did things. I remember one specific was, I think it was the Kyle Harrison 3-step split dodge. That's kind of where I started to learn mine. And then I kind of took some off of how Paul Rabel did it, how Mark Millen did it, a little bit of Rob Pennell flair into it, and kind of just tried to combine all of those guys into something that worked for me. Because I knew at the end of the day I wasn't going to be those guys. I wanted to be myself. But still use their skills and their talents to my advantage as best as I could.
Pretty good guys to model your game after. Those are good choices. Today, social media is such a big part of the world. What role does social media play in your life? Do you like it, or do you hate it?
I would say I'm kind of indifferent. I like it in a sense that you get to kind of see what people are doing. It's definitely an interesting thing with the sport of lacrosse because, we don't get the publicity that NBA or NFL players would get. And so, building our own brand is something that if you want to be truly successful, you kind of have to do it. The first two guys that come to mind are obviously Paul Rabel and Rob Pennell. They're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube pages, whatever it may be, and just trying to cover as much of their life possible. So as much as, I post every now and then on Instagram, retweet a lot on Twitter. But those two platforms have become a staple of a professional lacrosse player's life. It's kind of cool in that aspect. Makes it a very modern sport. But as a college player, it's kind of just, I'm not quite using it as a 100% brand building activity yet. Still can post pictures with my friends and stuff like that, and just follow along with the people around me and my friends and whatever they're doing. So, I would say indifferent, but necessary with the sport that I play.
Are there rules at Penn State for how you guys can use social media?
Yeah, the NCAA, you're not allowed to, the post if somebody you can't really post for companies or things like that, obviously. But as for posting pictures, you're allowed to post whatever you want within reason. Obviously, captions need to be appropriate. They need to be overall appropriate. But I don't think anybody on our team is anywhere close. I know there's been some recent things going on with some guys in the NCAA with that, and it's unfortunate, but it's just the matter of the fact that you play for a league, and when you sign those papers, those are the rules that you have to abide by.
Yeah. Well, I know we're only about a little more than halfway through the year, but reflecting on this great season you've had so far, what are some of the moments that stand out to you?
That Villanova game was probably the biggest for me personally. That was my first game back, and there was some pregame jitters. But once I got out there, it was I felt fine. The Villanova game, just making a statement first and foremost against a very good team, was pretty big. And then I look at the Yale game. We lost that game, but I think that was one of the first times that we lost. But we felt that we truly left it all out on the field and didn't make too many mistakes. We didn't lose the game for ourselves. The other team just played well and did enough to win. I think that was a big step for us as a program. And then most recently, obviously, the Maryland win was so fun to be a part of. Have a lot of respect for Maryland. Don't necessarily love playing them a lot. They've gotten the best out of us the past 3 years, and luckily we were able to figure it out this year, and I'm assuming we'll probably see them again. But definitely that Maryland win, just from a program standpoint, was so cool to be a part of. And it's just one step in the right direction, but it's huge for a program like ours.
Yeah. Well, Grant, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Penn State's never won a playoff game. What does that mean to this year's team, and how do you get over that hump this season?
Yeah, that's thanks for bringing it up. We were in the playoffs my sophomore year and just kind of couldn't figure it out against Towson. It still lingers for sure. But I think actually this year's team is, we have a short-term goal, and that's just to keep getting better each day. But our long-term goal, I would say our long-term goal isn't actually just to, win a playoff game. Our long-term goal is to be playing in Philadelphia in late May. So I think we understand the steps and the process that we need to continue to harp on. We're continuing to do that. I would say we aren't looking towards the playoffs. I'd say we're looking towards Michigan, and then we're going to look towards Johns Hopkins, and then towards Rutgers, and then however the Big Ten tournament plays out, we'll look towards that and playing in New Jersey at Rutgers for that, and then hopefully get a bid for the playoffs and hopefully get a first round home game and then continue to push from there. But I would say it's actually not lingering on as much as you'd think. I'd say like last year, I'd say it was definitely a thought. But I'd say we're focused week to week this year, which is, I think, a way to go about things just beyond lacrosse.
Yeah. That's great. Well, and so we'll get one more question for you here. So you fill in the blank, okay? So blank makes a great lacrosse player.
I would say a guy that makes, that can contribute in multiple ways, and basically making the guys around them better. If you have guys around you that are willing to make plays that aren't goals or assists, hustles, ground balls, ride backs, cause turnovers, whatever it may be, but then also that are willing to do what's best for the team, as well as, give their very best for the guys around them. I'd say that's what makes a great player. And, those types of guys are the ones that do very well, with all sorts of accolades. And if you look at any great player, they're definitely a guy that can create for himself, but also for his teammates. So those are the guys that I definitely try to emulate on the field.
I love it, man. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks so much for coming on the show. Grant, congrats on a great start, and good luck with the rest of the season.
Great. Thanks for having me, Chris.